Hello and welcome to Press Corner here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Now, Press Corner, as most of you will know, is our regular Sunday morning review of key events with our colleagues in the media and other experts here in the heart of Europe. On Press Corner, we celebrate the luxury of a free press by listening to diverse opinions and letting our audience reach their own conclusions. So, let me introduce our guests. We start with Małgorzata Zawadka. She's a journalist, social anthropologist, and a long-time correspondent of the Polish media in the United States. So welcome back, Małgorzata.
Welcome.
Jacek, Żakowski, columnist at Collegium Civitas. So welcome. Our first time of meeting, I believe.
I
believe so. We have David McQuaid, who's an independent journalist, a former head of Bloomberg and Dow Jones. Also our first time. Welcome.
Thank you.
And, of course, Jakub Mielnik, whom we know very well. Welcome back. And Jakub is a columnist for Wprost.
Yes, thank you for having me here.
It's a pleasure, as always, Jakub. Thank you for taking time. So, it's been a busy week, busy 10 days. Yeah, we've had the G7, we've had the peace summit that Zelensky's organised, we've had elections, the European Parliament, we've had presidential elections in Slovakia, and we're going to try and cover as much of those, or as many of those as possible, in the limited time that we have available. So let's kick off with the G7 summit, which has just wrapped up yesterday. And I'd like to get your take on what the press is saying about that. But we'll kick off with a short video.
The leaders of the United States, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom and the European Union convened for 3 days at the luxurious Italian Borgo Egnazia resort. The most important decision to come out of the meeting is the agreement to use funds from the interest generated by Russia's frozen assets to the benefit of Ukraine. Totaling about $3 billion a year, the interest will be used to pay off the annual interest on the $50 billion loan for Ukraine, taken out on the international markets.
Another reminder to Putin, we're not backing down. In fact, we're standing together against this illegal aggression.
The presidents of Ukraine and the United States met at the sidelines of the summit and signed a 10-year defense agreement.
Today is a truly historic day, and we have signed the strongest agreement between Ukraine and the US since our independence.
The document reiterates US support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It is also meant to bring Kyiv closer to NATO membership. On Saturday, representatives of more than 100 states and organizations gathered in Switzerland for the Ukraine Peace Summit. While the most important point on the agenda is a peace solution, US Vice President Kamala Harris also announced an aid package of more than $1.5 billion, which will be used for restoration and humanitarian needs. Leaders of several Western states are taking part, as well as Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Putin's key ally, China, will not attend, arguing that both sides of the conflict need to participate in order to reach any conclusions. Despite Switzerland insisting on Russia's participation, Zelensky decided against its involvement.
Right, so lots of topics discussed at the G7. I'd like us to start, please, with the G7 resolution on Iran. And according to the Times of Israel, they warned Iran against advancing its nuclear enrichment program and said they would be ready to enforce new measures if Tehran were to transfer ballistic missiles to Russia. Of course, Iran responded in the expected way. They actually doubled the amount of number of nuclear reactors that they were building. Now, it sounds as though we're seeing an axis build up between Russia, China and Iran. What are your biggest concerns about this axis? I'll start with you, if I may, Małgorzata.
Well, the concerns are exactly the same, that we have autocratic governments and we have democratic governments. And the world became what actually Samuel Huntington was saying in 90s, that there will be a culture clash. And there is a culture clash. We are in the midst of it. And from my perspective, it's good that we see the G7 world leaders, and that we will see much more this symbolic gestures that the Western world is together. But whatever happens, we are in the shade of the elections in France now,
right.
Elections in America, and so we will see. But from the pictures, it looks perfect. From the resolutions, it looks smart, because those countries have to be represented. The West world, the democracies of the world, they have to show unity.
Right.
And my only concern for those beautiful G7 meeting pictures was there is a slight normalization of Giorgia Meloni, who is also right-wing party leader. However, I hope that Meloni is actually normalize her stance.
I want to come back to the parliamentary elections in just a minute. But David, if I may get your view on this. So I mean, it has to be more than just symbolic, doesn't it? I mean, Iran is a clear and present danger to countries. I mean, Israel is an obvious example, but other countries as well, where it's funding terrorism and so on.
Well, yeah, although I think that the fundamental danger is obviously the China-Russia axis. Iran is a useful subsidiary ally and obviously presents a regional threat in the Middle East, but I wouldn't call it the centerpiece of either the G7 or of the strategic dilemmas that the West is facing. I mean, I would agree with what Małgorzata said, that they had to maintain unity, but the elephant in the room clearly is the disunity in the United States and in Europe in the domestic electorates, and we've seen. With the elections we'll be discussing later, we've seen that already, and we're going to, all through this year, we're going to be dealing with this issue.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. There's absolutely no doubt. But the risk, and in the Times of Israel, of course, focuses on that, is a nuclear-armed Iran. Is that something that's simply pie in the sky, or is it a reality, a potential reality?
I believe it's reality. And I don't think we can do much about that. Because look what happened in Geneva. There were half of the world, as far as number of states is concerned, but not half of the world, as economy is concerned, and as far as population is concerned. So we are smaller half, say, of the world, of the power. And we are definitely losing. So if you remember, in a little bit more than 20 years, the output of the so-called West decreased from 40 to less than 20%.
Right.
So of global output. So, well, these are important factors. A new alliance has been created already.
Yeah.
China, Russia, Saudi Arabia in between, and Brazil in between. But look at South Africa, for example, which is strongly opposing Western.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? Basically, Jakub, we're seeing major shifts, tectonic shifts, in fact, aren't we, in terms of alliances and breakups. The global South, Iran, Russia, economically, socially, and militarily. How do you see this playing out? Just very quickly, if you would, please.
Well, you are right that this major shift happened, and the Western response for this shift is very, very slow and very hesitant.
Right.
So seeing this maybe symbolic and just photo ops, but it's also the substance of those meetings are to unite the Western alliances, and it's good it happens right now. So it seems like our allies comes to terms of stronger actions, even if it can be criticized as just a display of PR.
Right.
it's still much more than we've seen during last few years, and those new axis of evil, as it was called recently, was clearly exploiting those discrepancies and the differences between within European Union, between Europe and United States, and broader within so-called Western alliance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we need this strong stance and
a united and perhaps a faster response. Let's move on now to the Peace Summit, which today is the second day of the Peace Summit in Switzerland, called by President Zelensky. Politico has an article which quotes Andrei Yermak. He's head of the Ukrainian president's office, and he's referring to Russia's so-called peace proposal. And he says basically there's no compromise on independence or territorial integrity. Małgorzata, I mean, this is not surprising to us, is it? But is it realistic?
The Putin proposals?
Yeah. No, Andrei Yermak's response to it. He says it's simply no compromise on independence or territorial integrity, and Putin's proposal is saying, you know, whatever we've taken over,
the
we'll
Putin
keep.
Shameless, was shameless, ridiculous.
Right.
He just wanted to take part in this united show of. He just wanted to have his 5 minutes of fame.
Right.
He couldn't be isolated, so he came up with this ridiculous proposal.
Right.
Of course, it was just something that could never. No one, his or her right mind of the Western world could say that it's okay.
Okay. Well,
of course, from the PR point of view, to other countries,
right.
they will say that Putin came up with the initiative of peace proposal. But I hope that the statements from Switzerland will get into the bubbles of those other, but probably they won't. So but this was just Putin's trying to be present in the
so have some kind of representation,
trying to exclude him completely from this 2 weeks of world celebration.
Understood. So Putin didn't want to be excluded, right? So what he does is he puts this forward. Absolutely, he wants to put this forward, knowing that nobody's really going to.
He was also testing Western unity, and I think one of the telltales, very important takeaways before we poo-poo the G7, in addition to the peace summit, is Chancellor Scholz's very strong response, saying that Putin's proposal was unserious because. Putin is always probing for waverers, people who are saying, okay, let's cut a deal. And obviously what Putin was proposing was the Sudetenland, 1938, and another Munich. And at least this time around, the G7 didn't show any interest in Munich. So in that sense, I'm pleased.
Yeah. No, well, clearly, I mean, you know, the G7 seems to be united in their response. But are you getting a sense, Jacek, that there are countries which are starting to lose patience with Ukraine? I mean, there's so much else going on, right, around the world. There's the Asia-Pacific region and various other areas. Do you think that there are some countries who are listening with half a year to Putin's proposition? What do you think? Is there a patience limit?
Well, of course there is. And especially when you see a response to what Chancellor said from his colleagues in the party, very important persons, asking him to take Putin's proposal seriously. But how seriously is united the West is shown by G7 offer of Russian money to Ukraine. It concerns not only money, it concerns also a property right idea on which the West has been built.
Right.
So this is fundamental change or turn in Western identity. It means Russia is no more our competitor. This is enemy. Because only when you speak about enemy, you can speak about property rights.
So you're looking at it through the right prism, yes. Now, just very quickly, Jakub, with this proposal from Russia, where do you think overall this is going to influence, if at all, the peace summit? And what do you expect to come out of the peace summit at the end of it?
Well, you know, the numbers of Kremlin useful idiots in the West are are quite high, and even if Russia is not present during this peace summit, you know, they have their representatives. Well, let's name, for example, Hungarian foreign minister who was clearly visiting Moscow or St. Petersburg actually before attending this summit. That you know, if someone is asking who's there from Russian side, we can say that Hungarian foreign minister is representing Russian interests there. So of course there are very influential people and influential politicians who are looking for solutions favorable for Putin and for Moscow. But you know, this is like Putin is trying to show that he has some kind of initiative after quite a difficult week for him. His offensive in Ukraine around Kharkiv is not going according to the plan, as all the previous offensives in Ukraine. He was punished by G7 with this assets taking over. There are American sanctions which are designed just to cut Russia off dollar zone and pushing them clearly into Chinese economic sphere of influence. So there are other factors like domestic issues in Russia, the prospect of rising taxes in Russia, which can also be not a very good idea from the perspective of Russian population, which are complaining about the costs of war, not only human costs but also economic costs.
Well, certainly there'll be lots of pressures.
So this is like, you know, offering Ukrainians to withdraw and abandon Ukraine is not a peace not a peace proposal.
Okay.
This is the signal for the West that I'm not going to negotiate with you in any way.
Right. Well, it certainly sounds that way. Okay, let's move on now to the European parliamentary elections, and talks are currently going on about who's going to take the top posts. And there was an article in Politico which caught my eye, and before we say it, before we talk about that, actually, that article, we do have a short video to share.
The most crushing defeat was dealt to French President Emmanuel Macron, whose Renaissance party only won 15% of the vote, less than half the result of Le Pen's far-right national rally. In response, Macron dissolved the National Assembly, calling snap elections later this month. In Germany, the controversial far-right party AfD took second place, with 14% of the vote. This comes despite recent scandals, including the party leader's downplaying of Nazi crimes and alleged ties to China. Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy Nationalist Party has also made sizable gains, more than doubling their number of seats in the European Parliament. In contrast to the results coming out of Western Europe, far-right parties east of Berlin have not been able to make significant gains in the European Parliament. In Poland, the EU's largest eastern member, Civic Coalition led with 38% of the vote. Hungary's nationalist ruling party, Fidesz, won the vote but lost 2 seats after their support dropped 10% compared to 2019. The Czech Republic's populist center-right party ANO narrowly took first place, gaining 4 seats. In Romania, the ruling center-left coalition received more than 50% of the vote.
This election on European soil had 2 basic messages. Firstly, there is still a majority in favor of a strong Europe in the center of the political spectrum. In other words, the center has held, but it is also true that the extremes on the left and on the right have gained support.
Although the mainstream parties are set to maintain their majority, the results show that anti-establishment sentiments are on the rise among voters in the 27 member countries.
So people were pretty scared, right, that the extremes, either right or left, were going to take over. It seems as though that hasn't happened. Of course, there have been some shifts. But before we get into that, there was an article in Politico which talks about the top jobs. Being kind of almost agreed informally, and they'd be organised by Monday, tomorrow. So what struck me, Jacek, was that this is the fastest I've seen the European Union move, right, in terms of any kind of decisions. But when it comes to Ukraine or other international policies, it's not quite the same. Would you agree?
Well, here situation is pretty simple and very, very difficult on the same time. I mean, we know who will create the coalition in the European Union, and we know that our environment, I mean, war in Russia, China's position, migration, these are very, very sensitive and massive problems we must deal with not stop. If we would negotiate the Commission, the composition of the Commission for weeks, we would lose these weeks, and we cannot decide for that. So yes, this promises that perhaps will be quicker and more effective with the new, almost the same Commission.
Right. We don't expect any major changes. I mean, it seems as though von der Leyen is staying in position and so on, and generally the flavour, the texture is going to remain unchanged. Moving on now, I mean, I know, Małgorzata,
I'm not sure about it.
You're not sure? OK. I'll come right back to you if you'll give me a second. I want to... Małgorzata, I know you had something to say about the shift.
Oh, I just wanted to say that this was actually a pretty good week for the female part of the European Union and politics. And Ursula von der Leyen had a good week, and she had this triumphant speech, which she said that the world was in the turmoil and that finally we all know it. I would add that the world is spinning. Everything is going faster and faster, and we will see what will happen during the elections. And also for Giorgia Meloni, who had a really very successful week, I would say. And also I wanted to say that also Vladimir Zelensky had a very good, we have to say that after this disastrous wait in US Congress that the help was delayed. Now I think that world leaders, especially American president, wanted to apologize. Even he did apologize for this delay, and they really gave Ukraine an enormous support.
But at the same time, Donald Trump is strictly attacking Zelensky, speaking about 60 billions he takes whenever he comes to America.
We'll be talking about that later. I just want to finish the European Parliament issue. Now, Tusk, Civil Coalition, 37.1% of the votes for, in the European parliamentary elections. Obviously still leading, but nonetheless, there's some kind of, there's been a shift. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm sorry, that's the best result in the EPP. I mean, in terms of the percentage of the vote. That's better than the CDU-CSU with 30%. It's better than Meloni with 28%. So I'm sorry, they're the second. The Civic Coalition, is the second largest number of deputies in the next European Parliament in the EPP. So I think we can't say that they've done badly. I think the test about how well Tusk has done, I think, is going to be whether we see a third woman have a good week, and that's Kaja Kallas, who might become the next High Representative. In other words, the person responsible for the EU's foreign policy. And this is something that Eastern Europe has been chafing about, not just Poles, but Romanians and the Baltics for a long time, about not being represented among the top leadership, really, since Tusk himself was president of the European Council. And obviously, there are lots of reservations about Kaja Kallas, especially in the South, because she's been so, strong in standing up to Russia that there's a fear that she would both be too extreme and ignore other issues that were of concern, for example, in the Middle East or North Africa. And so my feeling is that if Kaja Kallas is going to be the next High Representative, that we can say that Tusk has already had, among other people, has had an influence on what's going on in Brussels.
Okay, so it's a bigger influence for Tusk. Jakub, I want to ask you about Fidesz, Hungary's right-wing party. Viktor Orban recorded its lowest share, so this is coming from TVP World, recorded its lowest share of the vote in almost 20 years in Sunday's European elections. The rival party, Tisza, taking 30% of the vote, more than all other opposition groups combined. What does that tell you in terms of, is this a reflection of how Hungarians feel? Is this what we can expect?
Well, it depends how do we define opposition. If this new party is really in opposition, or it's just some kind of better, more polished version of what Fidesz is offering to Hungarians and to Europe. The good thing about the outcome of European election is that the impact of European Parliament on European policy is not as big as enthusiastically claim people who managed to get there.
Right. Yes, but there are more coalitions now, right?
The European policy is formed by governments and with the assistance of European Parliament, which can make a lot of noise, but this is more balance between the Commission and national governments than European Parliament. So in that regard, we are pretty much safe, and this storm of European Parliament by extreme populist parties was not successful enough. The composition of main groupings are pretty much the same as it used to be in the previous parliament, which doesn't mean that Ursula von der Leyen can be taken as a next head of European Commission for sure, because she has a lot of opposition even within EPP. We should remember that she was not a front runner during the last election. She was just brought by Donald Tusk at the time, the head of European Council.
Right.
She was brought, her name was brought to EPP deputies, and there was, whole night fight about it because so-called Spitzenkandidat was just ignored, and it was also seen as just ignoring the democratic process of electing such a high-profile positions in European Union. So it cannot be taken for granted, but the ball is in the governments, European governments, and here we have a very, very significant and very difficult situation, especially in regard of France and the outcome of election there, and the prospect of snap elections, national elections in France, and the outcome of it can be unpredictable also for European politics.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kuba was talking about the French snap election. Do you think that's going to have any impact on France's influence in the European Union? Małgorzata?
If the election will be successful, France will take away our Polish emblem of being the best student of democracy. So I am puzzled. I want French democracy to win, but for now we are the perfect. We won as European election. We chased away the demons of populism in Europe. We are best for now. So we'll see. Of course, this is the va-banque game of President Macron, and even if Le Pen's party wins, they will have a very, very hard time under Macron presidency. So maybe he will just torture them, so everyone will know, psychologically at least.
Yeah,
and the young gentleman, Jordan Bordella, will be the premier, so it will be. Of course, I just wanted to say one thing. Can we talk a little bit about the unbelievably colorful crowd of parliamentary, Polish parliamentarists?
Unfortunately, we do need to move on to the US. Maybe if we have time afterwards, but I would like to talk about the internal situation in the US.
Only one short remark, because what happened in France is very important also, because President Macron forced the left to create Popular Front.
Right.
And perhaps this is the major output of his decision, because with strong left, now almost 30% in France, Macron has a good chance to govern democratically and to postpone Meloni Le Pen as he would like to. So this is really unexpected, but very strong factor.
This is
a
bold move, but I have an impression that Macron has also a David Cameron moment, you know, just relying on sanity of voters in the present time is really dangerous.
Małgorzata, I know you wanted to say something, so just to be fair, very quickly, please, if you will.
Oh, I just wanted to say that we have such a colorful crowd going to European Union that finally European Union seems to stopped being boring. This is like amazing.
Right, so you approve?
I approve, and we have also two ladies from far right who won, the very young but very outspoken, which is funny, and I heard them saying, Ursula von der Leyen, we are coming for you.
Well, there you go.
Coming for you.
Some healthy competition. Let's move on now to the United States and what's happening ahead of the elections, and we do have a short video on this one.
On May 30th, former U.S. President and current Republican candidate in the 2024 presidential race, Donald Trump, became the first president in U.S. history to have been found guilty of a crime. Despite what could be considered a political bombshell, the verdict does not seem to have put a dent in his popularity, as many of his supporters believe the trial to be politically motivated. One of the Republican talking points propagates the theory that the American judicial system is controlled by either a powerful deep state or Joe Biden himself, regardless of the president's own son's guilty verdict from June 11th. A federal jury, which is part of President Biden's administration, convicted Hunter Biden on 3 gun ownership charges. Undermining Republican conspiracy theory, the verdict might give Biden a small boost in the polls.
With regard to the question regarding the family, I'm extremely proud of my son Hunter. He has overcome an addiction. He's one of the brightest, most decent men I know. And I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
While the race for the White House continues, the American government is facing an increasingly incendiary geopolitical landscape. On Thursday, Russia's Admiral Gorshkov frigate and the nuclear-powered submarine Kazan docked in Havana as a part of a 5-day visit. The move comes shortly after the U.S. allowed Ukraine to attack targets across the Russian border and is intended as a show of close ties between Russia and Cuba. Although the submarine was not armed with nuclear warheads, the visit is a show of Russia's strength in the region.
So, David, I want to start with you, if I may. So, Hunter Biden's been found guilty of these. What's going to happen to him? Is he going to go to jail? Are there any risks, perhaps, that he might?
I have no idea, to tell you the truth. He might go to jail. He might get a suspended sentence or a fine. But the point is, it served its political purpose, which the Republicans wanted to set up an equivalence between Trump's numerous crimes in and out of office and Hunter Biden, thereby Biden, and they've I think politically have succeeded in doing that.
So okay, so does that mean that the courts are politically motivated then?
No. I don't see why one would assume that.
Well, I was just thinking that there was a political ambition, and by him being found guilty, that ambition has been met. Just clarifying.
No, it's not. I don't view it as a political verdict. I think it's simply. He was a self-confessed drug addict who was out of control and violated, a firearms statute. I just think it's. As a news story, it is infinitely less important than the numerous court proceedings that are now in place against somebody who might become president of the United States.
Right.
And the point is that playing defense, the Republicans managed to establish an equivalency there, which I think the fact that we're spending so much time on this show talking about it is another example that the Republicans succeeded.
Right, okay, so the Republicans have succeeded because we're talking about it. Would you agree, Jacek?
Well, the prediction of The Economist. 2-1 for Trump. So Trump wins. But whether it means Republicans win, I'm not sure. Because Trump has hijacked the Republican Party, but not Republican ideas. So he's strictly against all Republican ideas, except one, the low taxes, and all others are absent. So I think Trump is winning, Biden is losing, and Republicans are losing. This is the problem of the United States now and of the entire world and our politics internationally considered.
So, Małgorzata, Trump is winning.
Why is
everyone
Trump
else is
winning?
losing?
Because Biden's son was found guilty. I mean, the Democratic Part can say that the justice system is not weaponized, and
right. Well,
it's
that was David's point.
So there are the two sides can have.
Yes, but in terms of
argument.
Trump's popularity.
In terms of
compared to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party?
Well, that's of course. However, and we will see, because this is such a short time. I really think that it's impossible to draw conclusions
right.
what Biden sentencing means for
Okay.
Because I think the weaponization of the justice system was such a strong argument that now they don't have this argument.
That's been taken away from
Yes, so even the Fox News is saying that it was a plot to make seem that he had a trial, because now the Democrats can say that they did not legalize the system.
So it was apolitical.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a total loss for Biden's son and for Joe Biden personally.
Right.
It was such a hard moment. He was between D-Day and the G7 meeting, and he got the news that his son is probably going to prison. Because if he is found, if he is not sentenced this time, he might be sentenced the second time, because he awaits the trial on tax evasion.
Right. And what is very important for Democrats is what Biden said: he will not free his son. And this is absolutely crucial for the Democratic side. But Republican side will believe that old Biden is as bad as the young Biden, and so on and so on, because this is time when everybody believes what he likes, not what's reality.
Well, let me bring Kuba in, who's been extremely patient. so Jakub, I mean, what do you make of this? I mean, there'll always be accusations and counter-accusations, going around. I mean, do you share David's view that basically this is a non-entity in terms of a topic and shouldn't really form part of our conversation? Let's move on to something, for grown-ups.
Well, actually, I think that all this story with Biden's son can be much more favorable for running for president than against him. He shows himself as a real human being with family problems, showing himself as someone who can deal with these problems. And if we compare it with Trump's legal problems, this is, as you said, these are just non-comparable things.
Right.
That's the first thing. The other thing is, I'm not sure if we also can predict the outcome of American election because of very peculiar American electoral system. So we have few swing states which decide on the outcome of the election, and even if the general polls show that Trump has more support than Biden, it doesn't mean anything. So the outcome can be really surprising in the autumn. So
all the pieces are up in the air, and goodness knows how they're going to fall.
And the final thing, because that's why we are talking about it, especially here right now, is American Russian policy, Eastern policy, Ukrainian war. I'm not sure if we should remember that the former Trump administration was instrumental into preparing Ukraine for Russian attack, and they were supporting Ukraine's Zelensky policy, and they were sending the armaments before Russians start full-scale war in Ukraine. So those points of electoral campaign can be easily changed changed if the broader picture of American interests in the world will demand it. Like,
right. Okay.
There is a problem, American problem with China, and Republicans clearly define it that that's the primary goal. And if Europe is taking over and taking more responsibility for fighting Russia in Europe,
then they can focus on.
Probably Trump administration can live with that.
Thank you for that, Jakub. I'd like us to move on to the last one. We don't have much time left, sadly. But David, I'd like to get your view on this. The U.S. nuclear-powered submarine USS Helena, this is in Newsweek, has arrived at a naval base in Guantanamo Bay. Provocative, defensive, how would you categorize the fact that you've got a nuclear-powered submarine now in Cuba, when there's a Russian fleet, a Russian influence certainly in the region? What kind of message is this sending?
It's replaying a golden oldie from the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, the thing to bear in mind is that the U.S. has been operating a naval base in Guantanamo for more than half a century, and so ship movements are normal. The thing I noticed, because I looked very carefully, that this Russian fleet movement in the Caribbean is getting much wider coverage in Europe than it is in the United States.
Right.
My feeling is that it's a non-story in the States, and hardly anyone noticed, simply because, frankly, everyone realizes that the Russian Navy is no threat to anybody except itself, and so there's no concern there. There's much more concern. Very interesting. Donald Trump had some very snide comments about Zelensky yesterday in Detroit. He was speaking to some black church leaders and saying that he must be the greatest salesman in the history of politicians, because every time he comes to the States, he walks away with $60 billion. But the interesting thing was that I looked at 3 major U.S. newspapers for coverage on this, and only one, the New York Times, even mentioned the Zelensky comments, and they mentioned it at the very end of the story. The entire rest of it was actually about Trump's domestic agenda and the fact that he is appealing more and more to non-white middle-class male voters. A growing portion of black men, particularly older men, and Hispanic men are thinking about voting for Donald Trump either as a protest vote or because his conservative values are more theirs. So what I guess I'm saying is that maybe Europe might be a little frightened by a Russian nuclear submarine and a Russian corvette in Cuba.
Right.
But the United States, the definite threat to Europe, Ukraine, and the United States has nothing to do with Russian military capacity. It has to do with Russia's ability to weaponize our own political differences and get us arguing among them ourselves. That's the threat.
Which has been pretty good at doing, actually, so far. As we all know, I mean, the Russian Navy wasn't a particularly difficult target or challenge for Ukraine, which doesn't actually have a navy, but the Black Sea Fleet has almost been destroyed. What do you make of this movement? Is it as David says, basically a nothing story?
To MAGA voters is kind of a warning that, look, Donald Trump promises to end a Ukraine war in a day, so we will not be here by the Florida shore.
So you don't believe it?
So this is a warning, and it's also a warning because we are after like few weeks after America's agreed to for the use of American missiles to hit Russian targets. So this is also.
But only just across the border.
Shows Americans that, look, I could hit your target from my ship. So I think it's a warning. And while we are dismissing the Hunter Biden impact on the world, let's not forget that the hatred between Donald Trump and Zelensky started when Zelensky refused to go into the Biden dealings with the.
This is personal.
It's personal. So
it's personal. So yes. So Jakub, 1 minute, please. We're nearing the end. Your view. So this is basically something that Trump is saying that he actually means to carry through. Would you agree?
What, you mean the Russian fleet in Cuba?
Well, the Russian fleet, but also the attitude towards Ukraine and stopping the.
Well, this is, I don't know, my impression with President Trump is that he's very impulsive and, policies formed not by one person tweeting at 4 a.m., but by administration and institutions which are not manned by Trump impersonators only. And if we are talking about the Russian fleet in Cuba, this is like, I have two takes. One, they are much safer on Caribbean than in Black Sea.
Black Sea, yeah.
And the other good thing is that at least they managed to cross the Atlantic, which is not
a commendable feat. It's a commendable. Last word to you, Jacek.
Well, I also remember that President Zelensky refused to confirm that President Trump was pressing on him and so on. And what Trump said in Chicago, in fact, was that he likes Zelensky. So, well, I think he's looking for different possibilities, like a snake move.
Right.
And he will probably not follow what he's saying now. He will do what will be profitable for him at a given time.
Right, okay. So this is all part of his political agenda, his political speech-making for his audience. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it here. So thank you very much, Małgorzata and Jacek, David and Jakub, for your opinions and insights. I wish we had more time, but sadly the clock has beaten us. One day soon, I hope. Thank you. And that's all from us here on Press Corner today, but don't go away. As always, we have lots more coming up. Goodbye.